I had no money at all, so I couldn't feed the crew. It was a 2-day shoot. We slept on the floor in an attic. Nightmare was my first attempt at making a horror film. It was the last short film I got to do with Sean before his manic attack. We had just come off the high of the previous shorts, and Sean and I wanted to take it to the next level. So you'll see in this movie, it's very active. There's a lot of camera movements. There's very little dialogue because it's just between this woman and this entity that's haunting her dreams. So we wanted to find ways to make her relatable. And I really enjoyed the process. It was grueling. We did at least 4 days of choreography, and then Corey hurt her hand, which we sort of like wrote that into the script as a joke. We had to do all the choreography ourselves. We didn't have a stunt coordinator, and YouTube at the time didn't really have very many videos on the subject, so I did what I could to study certain camera movements, but for the most part, we were really just shooting in the dark, both literally and figuratively. But I had a lot of fun. I think the end result, it shows heart, and I look back at that video often because despite all of its technical shortcomings, it's so charming. We basically did it with $5 and a bag of chips, and I didn't know that all these things were going to happen leading up to Solitude.
The theory was, if you run, you survive. Unless you're backed into a corner, then you transform. I became really good at that.
When you look at that project in particular, like especially from the past ones, which had very little, this one actually had a full setup of equipment. I was using a 1K RE light, we were using a Blackmagic Cinema Cam. It just changed the game for me and like what filmmaking could be, and it was probably the closest I've ever seen to like my vision coming to life. It was really thematic and moody, and it just elevated my artistry, I think. Something that I didn't consider was the time. I was impressed with the visuals, but also super stressed if you mess up a take, because a lot of him was inflicting harm to himself. We have to have him sit back down and go through the process of rebuilding that prosthetic all over again. It definitely taught me to be more mindful and to plan ahead. It was also the first time we did some visual effects. Funny enough, another artist who happened to work on the first Avatar film, he did the VFX for me. It's a really quick 10-second shot of a guy pulling an egg out of his palm, and inside the egg you can see it squirming, and then he puts it in his mouth and eats it. And this guy did it for $100, and I met him on Craigslist, and he's amazing. We met our DP on Craigslist as well. Everybody who joined the project did it for free. We ended up going to this mansion in Staten Island where we ended up spending the night for free. I had no money at all, so I couldn't feed the crew. It was a 2-day shoot. We slept on the floor in an attic. And that whole location that you saw was pretty much our bedroom for the night, because we had to shoot it all that one night. Because also one of the actors who was in it had a flight that night. So he was in the middle of shooting and then had to run to catch his flight. The main actor just so happened to be Method, so he was all about being in a very frantic, uncomfortable state. It just helped him. And I was just very surprised with how people responded to that and how on board they were, considering I didn't pay them anything and they gave me 2 days of their life. It was also an important moment for me because now it was like we're in the end game. And yeah, I learned a lot about myself outside of having that like safety blanket, because again, it's always cool when you have someone else around you who shares that energy. It's a lot easier to bear the burden. And when he left the picture for a while, it definitely forced me to reconsider my strategy and what kind of filmmaker I wanted to be. I want to say Craigslist is a good last resort. I would never say it should be your first option because there's so many platforms nowadays. Now, there's no real reason to go there unless you have to. I'm easygoing. I think I'm an easygoing filmmaker. Not that I don't take things seriously, but again, it goes back to the unofficial first rule of not overthinking. I tend to be very definitive in my choices, and I feel really good about them because I understand where they're headed. You know, if you understand where the tracks are going, you can place them anywhere. So that's pretty much my approach to filmmaking and who I am as a filmmaker.
Once anything becomes a habit, it takes very little effort. We do it automatically.